Hi, my name is Kevin Mack, and I'm with Eric Katz.
Hey, hey.
We both work at Cardinal Solutions, and this Friday I'm presenting at M3, and I'm creating some videos that are related to style guides. Yesterday we were going to try to film this video, but due to some technical glitches last night, we didn't get it to work. So this morning we're talking about UI architecture, so we'll be covering one of the tools that we like to use. So last year, Eric, myself, and some others here at Cardinal worked on creating a version of Pattern Lab for our clients, and we were going to open source it, but the project got kind of bloated and was slower to move. And this year, we've kind of focused our attention on using Fabricator, which is an open source project. It's a toolkit generator. It's really, really helpful for projects, and Eric and I are going to be showing some of the ways that we've customized it and been making it kind of better the way that we work on our projects. So Fabricator, as I said, is a tool that was built by Luke Askew. In the early days, I helped out on some of the development on it. Due to my schedule, I've been a little bit busy, but Fabricator 2 is coming out, and I'm hoping to contribute to it, and maybe some of the stuff that we're showing today will make it into the next version. All right, so looking at this, when you get to this page, you see some kind of overview of some colors as well as some glyphs that are inside this project. So glyphs are just kind of custom fonts that we made for the web. We also have SVG versions of these images as well as PNG versions and JPEGs, but we like to also keep them as fonts. It's really nice that we can hand that off to our client and they can use that in their design programs or even things like Word. And it also is just a really nice index of everything. So one of the things here is the colors. What we've done is we've added these little dots inside here as well as the outlining for it. And this is to show the contrast ratio of the colors. So these colors also generate a background color as well as a color for a font that you can use. And if it's being used as a background color, it changes both the background, the CSS background color property as well as the color property. So you know that the color that you're using is always going to pass accessibility standards. Inside here, we have some of our global components and break down into different categories. If I click on global, you can see some of our buttons here and some of our call to actions. I can also, so I can scroll through all this, but if I go to global and I click on something like forms, it will go directly to the form section of the style guide. And with all these different pieces and parts, I can actually click on it and say, all right, this is primary button large. I can click on it and see the source here. So this is something a developer could copy the code and use in another project. But we're going to also show you how you can use Fabricator and partials with CSS components and HTML and kind of craft them together. So this has been very helpful on our projects. And some of the customization that we've done is alignment to some of the pieces and parts that I'll be talking about on Friday. So here we have the global kind of style guide, and these are the far-reaching components that would be across all the projects for a company. Demo is kind of a application, so imagine that a company had two different sites, Demo and Foo. So these are the components that are related to Demo as well as in Foo. They're a little bit more limited in here, but if I click on blocks, you can see some custom modals that only go into the experience of Foo, where Demo doesn't have these accessible inside their project. So it's kind of a cool setup, and actually going to jump around. We didn't really rehearse this, so hopefully it turns out informative. So one of the things is when you get in Fabricator, so Demo is my project here, Source is where I'm going to be working. Inside here we've created what's called a color JSON, and all these have kind of a friendly marketing, have a group name for it and then a marketing name, so maybe the name that a marketing department uses to identify that color, and that's really only for purposes of this screen. So as a development team, we refer to this as a secondary palette, and the marketing team refers to it as burgundy, and then as we're developing, we're actually referring to it as our primary dark color. So this is the variable that we have, and it's also extended to other places. So like this color secondary dark is also the background color for a button on a hover state, and the anchor tertiary active. So It's really nice so you can see where everything is, and I can manage and maintain my colors really just in one JSON file, so they're being extended out here. If I change it here, I'll cascade through my project. Here's where it's being extended out. What we've also done is this guy is being used to also generate not just that view on that side, but also our colors here. So this page is actually generated from that JSON. It gives a nice warning at the top, but you can see all the all the SAS variables are being generated, and it's using those colors there, and then where it's being extended to. In addition to that, we have a utility class down here at the bottom where it's making all the variants of the color. So it's making the background color, as I said, the background color as well as the color inside of it, to making sure that it's passing the different standards for accessibility. All right, so that's enough about colors. If we look at, again, here is the architecture that's kind of built into Fabricator. Inside of our toolkit, we have styles, and we use SAS and follow its CSS, which is a methodology that was created by Harry Roberts. Here I can see my global styles. I can see the styles for foo, or that application, as well as for demo, which is another application. So they can have their own styles that are going to be extending the global style sheet. Inside of global, we have our settings. So settings are things like global variables, configuration for the project. So here you can see some max width, some definition of like border radius, mobile height, some of those really important variables that are in SAS. And then I break down to breakpoints across my project. As I said, the color is being generated here, and typography. So the reason why these variables are at the top in settings is so that they can be accessible through all the partials of SAS. Next we get into the tools, which are those mixins and functions inside SAS, and here are all the different ones. So here are some of the, here's a rem to M converter, which is very, very helpful. The scalable library that Eric helped me write early this year. The unit library that I wrote about 2 years ago is also included in here. A string replace, which is used in some of these libraries, as well as a width generator, which is a project that I'll be releasing probably next month. Outside that, then we get into the elements and kind of the resets on type selectors. So type selector is something like a UL or an H1. So here you can see that my video last time I talked about this, the resets on H1s through H6s, as well as paragraphs on order lists, and order lists have a reset of margin top bottom. Objects are about the structures that are inside of our project and the breakdown of it. So these are things that are more structural based without skin. So use some sectional things in here. A good example of it is the media object and the flag object. Then we get into component, which are really based off of specific needs for the project at a global level. And then at the application layer, we create things that are specific to it. So that's where you'll find the styling of that pop-up module that I showed earlier. And then from there, we jump into trumps as well as utility classes. So there's a utility class for positioning here, so relative fixed. I'm using my suffix K library, which extends these classes for small, medium, and large, and creates a class that makes it work on these small sizes, medium sizes, or large sizes. Now, to really show outside the architecture of here, we do have some materials, and again, they're broken down by those demos, the foo, which are the two different applications, and then portal's another one inside here, and the global far-reaching one that was being shown over here. So these are kind of the breakdown of those different pieces, so they're folder structures. Now, what we've done inside here is we've created or rewrote how Fabricator works, and here's a scratch file. These are really where we're treating them as kind of an area where we can demo and throw away the code afterwards. How I could reference something like this button. So if I go to global and I go to CTAs here, you can see that this is button primary large. That's the name of the file. I can also look at the source, and one of the things that we've been doing recently is adding this data component. So if it's a component that is a reusable component, whether it's at the global or application layer, we give it a data component. So when you're looking at the code that's been integrated in, say, a .NET or a PHP or whatever your server-side language is, you know where that component is. And this is actually the code that I can use in Mustache to relate it and use it to build out my templates. One of the other cool things that we've come up with is inside of our classes, we use this double star. And the double star is to identify what are the core pieces of what makes this a button. So using object-oriented CSS or multiple classes inside a class attribute, it can be confusing on what I can remove and what I can't remove. So if I want this guy to be rendered this way, it has these stars. If I go into maybe something like this guy, you can see that these are what makes this style. And if I'm editing anything inside here, it's going to break the look and feel of this. Another thing that we've been doing, so if I open up this secondary button inside of here, I go to Materials, Global, CTAs, let's go to Button, It's kind of a hard one to see because we also can turn our buttons into anchors. It's a really good one that's simplified. Give you an anchor. Sure. So inside the anchor, you can see that what makes this anchor style. So if I were to go back here and just look at global CTAs, scroll down to anchor, that's what an anchor is. What this is, how you get that look is you add the class CAnchor. So inside there, that's how you get that formatting. Then we have what's referred to as extended classes, and these are part of including partials. You can pass different classes to it, and it extends the look and feel of those components. So these are things like your utility help classes, which help it, maybe if it's an anchor and I want the text to be centered, or I want to make it be a display block and go the full width, I can do that by passing it here. Object classes are following more of the BEM structure, so they're related to a component and the context in which they're being integrated in. So the object classes go before, and the extended classes go at the end, and everything that makes a component goes in the middle. And we have this data attribute here, so it becomes a really nice reference. So that's a long explanation for that. But if I go to Pages and I go to Scratch and I say I'm going to include a button, I put global.button primary. I hit Save, and when I go back to my browser in Scratch files, thought I had that open. Here's the button. I can change this to secondary, and the button will change to a secondary color here. And if I inspect this guy, you can see that it has the button secondary, and it's coming inside here. I can put two of them together and say primary. And now I should have both the primary and secondary button right next to each other. What's really cool about this is if I go into, say, button global primary, and I make an update, so let's just put an X here and an X here, hit save. Now the button primary is going to get that update across anywhere in the library that I'm referencing it. So that's, you probably would never do an X and an X at the end, but these are, if I wanted to say, I want to change how my buttons are across all my projects, I can just update it in that partial and it should cascade through. So that's if there's DOM changes, and if there's CSS changes, that would just be in the classes that are inside these stars. I did talk about the extended classes, so if I want to say extended class, and I say u_dis_v u_full, if I do this, we see this guy go the full width, and if I inspect this, you can see that those u_dis_v go at the end of those. So I know that these are extending these classes, and if I remove them, it goes back to the core component. As I said, this has been really helpful for the way that we organize. And then kind of referencing it maybe in a BEM structure, if I had something like, tabular, so I should do at large. And another thing we've been doing are these pipes, and these pipes are separating out different parts of selectors or classes that have styling, and it's just another way to organize. So what I'm going to be writing here is for the mobile side, and on the desktop side this is going to be a 2-column grid, but when it goes to mobile, these are going to be stacked up on each other and then spaced. I'm going to do this at small and at small. So by doing this, we have this interface here, and these are next to each other. I could do something also like this. So I'm going to do a usize2 at large, which is one of the classes that we've written that will make this be 50-50%. So now we have this, should have a 50-50% here. Let's do one more thing. UAC at large. UAC at large. So now I should have these 2 buttons at the desktop size that are centered. I have a typo here. Oh, forgot one thing here. These tables do not go to full width. So now we have these 2 guys that are being centered in the middle, and it's a nice little grid here. And then as I go smaller, you can see that they stack up on top of each other, but they're spaced in between. And if I were to move this kind of this way, you can see that's more of like the mobile view and the desktop view. I can easily create design, so I can remove this on this guy, so he becomes centered on mobile as well as on desktop, and this guy becomes full width. So maybe that's like the look or feel that I wanted. On desktop, it's this way. Another really great thing to show is when you're presenting or working with as a designer and a developer, kind of collaborating and pairing together, we can have templates. So here's a template that I have. It's called template full, and there's template sidebar. So if I go back here and I go to foo pages, and there's template full. There's a base template here. And with all these templates, they would be built out to be responsive, and they're utilizing the pieces of the style guide. So here I can see this guy and how the menu kind of changes. And as we're building these things out, we're also testing them as we develop them. So every little piece is being tested. And then here's one with a sidebar on the side and the treatment for it on mobile. So what I can do is I can easily make changes. As I showed earlier, I could take maybe this grid that I built out on the scratch, and I could just plop it inside here. So by going to this guy, and then let's also add this to the other project, I could make this a partial if I really wanted to, if it was reusable. And let's go to here. So now if I look at this, there's that partial and it's being put in there. I can easily create some really nice designs very quickly. It allows me to iterate in the browser, reuse pieces, and actually work around the structures with no guessing. And the same thing on this page. Here's a full width and those buttons. I can utilize anything that's inside my style guide, and if I want to just include something, all I have to do is use that mustache partial. So that's kind of it for this. And Eric's going to talk about, so that's the front end side, that's the HTML, CSS, mustache, quick little overview of Fabricator. But outside of this, the other really cool piece that Eric's been working on is the global JavaScript and how it can be applied to multiple projects. So again, the architecture here is there's a global, and then there's different applications that you can extend it to and customize when you need to. So I don't know if you want to sit here or do you want to push over the computer.
Yeah, we can just push over the computer maybe. Cool. So yeah, a couple of things I want to show are just kind of brief, kind of things we built on top of Fabricator. Because Fabricator comes baked in with some pretty awesome features tied to using Gulp to compile CSS and Webpack to handle JavaScript bundling. So if we go into our Gulp file, the way we have our project here, the way Kevin just broke it down, was essentially we have pages broken up into different sections, one for demo, one for foo, and then we have like a global area where things kind of inherit from. So likewise in JavaScript, we're going to go through and if I go to our assets and our scripts, we can see that we have our toolkit scripts, and then we have our fabricator scripts. And these are the scripts that are kind of baked into fabricator, and this is kind of what gets built out in the fabricator UI. As far as like annotations for things like how to render components, or if there's any comments about how a component might function that are useful to a developer. So that's kind of how that gets baked into it. And then using kind of the same build system, we've been able to kind of extract out different JavaScript entry points for whatever products we need. So in this case, we might have a global JS file that gets bundled here for our global JavaScript library. We might have a foo.js file that gets bundled for just our foo project, and then a demo.js file that gets bundled for just our demo project. Coupled with the generation, so if we just dive in, we can kind of see that Fabricator kind of comes really nicely built out. We can just go in and say, okay, we want to add more entry points. We can just go ahead and create them here. We could say, oh, we want toolkit scripts global to render off of our Webpack config that gets passed in. And then if we go back to where that gets generated in our Gulp file, we can see that we have here our configuration, source scripts, global, foo, demo, and then default fabricator. So that's how these scripts get generated. The cool part about having these multiple bundles set up is that if there are global modules that we create, we can also have that set up within this sub-module folder where we have maybe things grouped by forms. If we have stuff like autocomplete, auto-growing for text areas, some sort of toggle functionality with a checkbox, state picker, we can go ahead and create all of them and organize them within a forms directory within our modules. And then as we need them, we can go ahead and include them. So the way that works is we'll actually have, let's see here, if we go into foo, for example, we have ES6 imports where we can import anything that gets exported from modules RX. If I go to our modules RX file, we can see that natural scrolling. This JavaScript renders out and exports that default RX object that it generates. And then from here, we can go ahead and do whatever we want with that object now, whether it's enable debugging or turning it off. Importing jQuery validation and unobtrusive validation, importing this pagination module, which is probably tied to some sort of step pagination section, or it could just be something like I said earlier with a date picker, where we have like maybe a form element where we need to go through and have this UI be generated for selecting and changing dates. So let's go back here real quick. I think that's about all I have here for just the compilation steps. Other cool things about using Fabricator as the base for our project is that we've been able to extend it pretty significantly in how we're rendering our templates using handlebars. Fabricator lets us go ahead and pass in, a helpers section where we can generate our own handlebars helpers. Let's see where that could be. There it is. And in here we can do stuff like this custom helper for data, which we use to kind of wrap around any sort of let's go to scratch here. What this does is it actually lets us inline some JSON data, so that way we can use it in our components here. So what we'll do is we'll actually wrap this into this data handlebars section. And let's say we wanted to update the text to be equal to hello. What we could do is then, instead of rendering our default text, is actually pass in the text from our data wrapper. We go back over here, we can see that the button has now changed to hello. And this happens to both buttons because both of these buttons use that text attribute by default. If we wanted to do a different text for this button, we could actually change this into maybe like a list, and then pass in an array of objects. And actually take our text hello section, now pass it to each one of these lists, and make this one say goodbye. And what we'll do is we'll wrap this now within lists, go through here, hit save, and we should see, so now we have, okay, so we see one component section we have there with hello, one with goodbye, and what we actually have to do is change where we're wrapping things. So this whole block, I actually want to just wrap around a table cell, and then this ending of that block will also be right here. And we save this, sorry, we're going to actually remove the second one. Or let's save this first and see what happens here. So I'm sure we get kind of the same thing. The only thing we cut out was we're no longer wrapping this class we did. So what we'll want to actually do is take our secondary button, and we'll want to add an extended classes key of this value. We'll pass here. And then we'll want to also pass extended classes on this, where you just do
let's make it blank.
Just blank. So let's do that, and we'll go ahead and delete this and refresh. And we should now see one button with hello, one button with goodbye. And let's see here. Oh, I have this hard-coded here still, the same for both of these. And what we could do is do extended classes here. I'll refresh.
I don't know why my computer's going so slow.
It's like we've been recording for only a few minutes. How could that happen?
That's fine. That was my
pressing?
computer. Yeah, it was my computer.
Okay, cool. And so here we have our two buttons, and there we go. So now we have different extended classes here. The cool thing about this, passing this in, is that we actually don't even need to do this. What we could just do is pass in this. Sounded weird, right? And visually, nothing should have changed. It's just automatically going through the properties on this, which is this context, and then which is this context for each instance of our component. So that's just one of the features we've added to help kind of build out our toolkit internally.
The huge benefit of this, what Eric just showed, is really the script side as well as these helper classes that we've added inside here. So it allows us to keep our JavaScript light and really only load the libraries that we need in the different pages. So it's a really cool structure that Eric's come up with on the JavaScript side. And as I said, this has been really helpful for us to iterate on design and also come up with some really creative experiences from the JavaScript side. So that's about it. Reach out to us if you have any questions.
See ya.